welcome everybody. This is the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation's National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week presentations. And we're very pleased today to have with us Professor Eugene Spafford. And Professor Spafford usually goes by Spaff, and I've known Spaff for a long time, being a fellow Purdue graduate, and that's where Spaff hails from, is from Purdue University. He is probably the most senior, or one of the seniors, most recognized leaders in the field of computing. So you have a great treat today. He's done a lot of research and development work, including not only with his students, but underlies all of cybersecurity mechanisms in use today by millions of systems. And that includes firewalls, intrusion detection, vulnerability scanners, integrity monitoring, forensics, and security architectures. It goes on saying that Spaff has received many, many awards within the community, and we're so happy, Spaff, that you're with us today to share the story of not only how you ended up Purdue, but also the diversity of the cybersecurity career environment. So Spaff, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark, and hello, everyone. I hope you are having a very pleasant late morning or afternoon, wherever you're located. My talk today, I'm going to cover several things. I'm talking primarily about cybersecurity and some issues about how cybersecurity is actually more than you might think it is as a field. And I'm also just going to give you a little introduction how I got here, because it's not a direct path. And for some of you who might be considering this as a career, it may be helpful to you to understand that there are many different pathways into the field. So with that said, let me move on here. And the question that some people have, and some of you may have, is when we talk about cybersecurity, exactly what does that mean? If we say a system is secure, how is that different from a system that's not secure? Or we talk about security features, what are they? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret, in that if you asked 10 people working in cybersecurity to precisely define cybersecurity, you might get back 11 different definitions. We don't have a single definition that we all rally around. We sort of know what it is and work towards it, but an exact definition that everybody agrees on and is on all the textbooks isn't quite there yet, because it's a new field. So I'm going to just start off here and talk a little bit about sort of an operational description that a lot of people use. Intuitive. A system is secure if it's protected against all kinds of threats. That sort of makes sense, I guess, if you're talking about protecting a computer system, making it secure, it's protected against all kinds of threats. So, for instance, can we protect a system now against random hackers? Yeah, almost all the time. If the system actually has somebody who's got some training and some budget for good tools, yeah, we can protect against random hackers. Can we protect against malware? Most of the time. There are some viruses and things like ransomware that may get through, particularly if we have some users of the system who are a little careless on what they click on. But most of the time, we can protect the systems. Can we protect a system against nation-state hackers? That means somebody who's trained by and has the resources of a national government behind them. Well, probably not. Only in special cases. Generally, we need to have a lot of resources and our own level of nation-state actors, defensive actors working through government agencies, if we're going to have a hope of protecting a system against that kind of attack. So now we're getting into territory that's a little more difficult. Protecting against all kinds of threats. Okay, how about a UFO invasion? No. We don't have any systems that are likely secure against that. We don't even know what kind of attack that might be. So having defenses against it? No way. How about an extinction level event, meteor impact? Again, definitely not. We don't have anything that would protect a computer system against that kind of threat. So from the standpoint of cybersecurity, we can't protect against everything. Now, you might sort of, if you were creative here and you were thinking about it, we could say, how about if we colonize Mars, for instance, and give them backup copies of everything? That would protect against that meteor impact. Well, yes, but the eventual heat death of the sun will mean the end of the inner planets. Now, admittedly, that's billions of years in the future, as far as we know, and so the data is probably not going to be worth as much by then. But there's a threat that we can't protect against. So the truth of the matter is cybersecurity is an unattainable goal in that we can protect against many threats, but we can't protect against every threat. Cybersecurity, and in fact, all kinds of security, are at their heart an economics issue. And that may be a little surprising to those of you who've done some computer science and programming, is it has nothing to do with the computers, but it has everything to do with budget and with risk analysis and priorities, because we can anticipate certain kinds of attacks, but to protect against those attacks, the threat that they pose requires investment in large-scale engineering, in resources, in backups, in people. And the data we're protecting may actually not be worth the investment to protect them. So as I note here, cybersecurity is also a management issue. That is, what's the best way to configure and run the systems to avoid problems? To make decisions about what needs to be protected and what kinds of risks we're going to accept. It's an education issue. We're going to have to worry about educating those managers to understand how to configure and protect the systems, and educate the people who use the system not to click on those suspicious links. And it's a law enforcement issue, because there are some things we may not be able to protect against, but if we are able to scare people off because they know we may catch them and put them in prison, they may not indulge in some of the criminal activity. Of course, there are some deep science and technical issues that go along with this, but it's a range of talents and expertise. It's not all just writing software or designing computer systems. It takes a broad range of talents to be able to build an ecosystem that is resistant to threats. That's where the interesting challenge really is how do we get the best security that we can, that we're willing to pay for, that's the reasonable cost, given adversaries with unknown motives and talents. So we don't know all the people or aliens on UFOs who are after our data. We don't know all the capabilities they have. We don't know all the hidden bugs that may be in our system. So how do we craft defenses against all of those possible threats without spending too much, and yet have good confidence that we've protected our systems? Along with that, we have to worry about maintaining privacy, personal information. It's not the same thing as security. It has some different connotations. How do we stay within the law? And that's local laws and laws in other countries. What's the best way to do this that adheres to public policy? That is, what's good for society in the way that we protect those systems? How do we go about educating the public about what the threats are and what kind of investments and future directions we need to take to best protect people? How do we go about investigating computer crime, espionage, and other kinds of misbehavior? That's another place we have to put resources and we have to think about. So there's a huge set of challenges, and they're not simply in writing software or designing computer systems. I'll come back to this, but let me just digress here for a moment and tell you a little bit about how I got here, because I think maybe that might give you an idea. I didn't start off in computing, and I didn't start off in security. I was born and raised in a suburb of Rochester, New York. And there it is on the map. That's Rochester, up on the shores of Lake Ontario in New York State. And my father was an accountant. My mother was a school teacher. I had an uncle who worked with NASA, designing missiles and rockets. And I had an uncle who was teaching business administration in a high school. So, we knew about technology, and I had some good access there, some good background to understand math and some other subjects, but nothing really special. So there's the town of Greece outside of Rochester, just in case you're interested. That's the little suburb that I was raised in. For K through 12, right, kindergarten through 12th grade, I did it all there in Greece, and I studied the usual things, a lot of the things that you probably study. I was good at math, and I was good at creative writing. I was not athletic. Failed at everything I tried to do athletic. I didn't really fit into any of the clubs or any of the groups, which was okay. I had friends there, but I was definitely not directed in that way. So I spent a lot of time reading, and I like to read science fiction. I like to read history. So those were things that were intriguing to me. Not really computing at all. In fact, I took one programming course, and that was using punch cards. And yes, I'm old. I've been doing this now, working with computers from that first class for about, it's 45 years. So it was a long time ago. But nonetheless, it was just an exposure, just a touch of computing. And I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't really that excited by it. Because I thought when I graduated from high school that I might want to be a lawyer, or I might want to work as an astronomer. I really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. But I did start at college, and family didn't have a lot of money. And so I had a scholarship and decided to commute from home to a local university, the University of Rochester. And so that was a commuting through the city every day for classes. And I was majoring in physics and math. Again, not computing. And I was thinking that I might want to switch to pre-law or chemistry because the physics class was really boring. That was more a function of the professor than the material. But I was also working 2 part-time jobs at the time, and commuting occupied a fair amount of my time. So I didn't really have time to join any clubs or do anything on campus. I'd been there a semester, and then my father fell ill and lost his job, and there was a recession in the economy. I mentioned I have a sister. She was still in high school. So I took a leave of absence from the university and went to find a job. In a recession, there aren't a lot of jobs, and all I had was a high school degree. So I searched and searched, and after some amount of time, I found a job as an assistant manager of a car wash car repair place. Now, if you've never had a position of assistant manager, the definition is there. The assistant manager is the person who does everything that no one else wants to do. So it was not a particularly fun job. While working at the car wash, I learned some management skills because I had people working for me. I had to help keep the books. I had to deal with customer complaints. That was all good. I mean, I learned a lot about dealing with people. But I also had a lot of time to study. On rainy days, people don't want to come in and have their car washed. So I was able to read a lot of books. I read 50 books in 18 months. Many of them were textbooks of things that I was kind of interested in. I picked up a chemistry textbook. I picked up a law book. I picked up a physics book. Those were really interesting, and I worked my way through them. I also read, again, a lot more history and science fiction. But those 18 months taught me I really didn't want a career doing anything like that. I did not want a career where I had to deal with a lot of customer complaints. I didn't want a career where I had to go outside when the weather was bad. I really didn't want to do those things, but I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So while I was working there, my sister graduated high school, and decided she was going to go to the State University of New York at Brockport. And I would drive her out there for a couple orientation sessions. And one was an information session on something they call the alternate college, an experimental at the time 3-year degree program. So you could get your undergraduate degree in 3 years. I was fascinated. I thought this was just the thing, especially after I'd done all this reading and lost the year at the CARWASH. So I applied and was accepted. I still had the scholarship from New York State. So I quit my job at the CARWASH and became a commuting student out to Brockport. And while there, I took a course in environmental science that used a computer for simulation, sort of rediscovered the computer and discovered I really liked it. Really, really liked it. To the point where I spent a lot of time doing extra programming. And the folks at the computing center got me a position as a helper because they were worried I would get myself in trouble if I didn't have something to occupy my time. Little did they know, I probably did get in trouble, but nonetheless, it was a great learning experience. So I graduated with a double major in math and computer science because I still loved math and I still did that work. And I had a longtime girlfriend who had another year of her undergrad to finish. And I had a company that was interested in hiring me, but they recommended that I go get a master's degree first. So the idea of going to get a master's degree while my girlfriend finished school seemed like a good idea. I applied to a bunch of schools and was accepted at Georgia Tech down in Atlanta. And I applied there because they had the computers that I'd been working with, and my advisors said they'd be willing to write letters there. I applied to a few others. I got accepted, but I couldn't afford them or didn't get admitted. So off I went to Georgia Tech. I wasn't commuting to Georgia Tech, by the way. I ended up spending 6 years there in grad school. I got interested in the teaching. I picked up another scholarship. I ended up getting both my master's and my PhD, working in operating systems and then distributed systems, and then did a postdoc in software engineering. That was my 6 years there. After that, I decided I was going to go off and get a faculty position, and applied a few places, and Purdue was one of the ones that was interested, and they offered me a position. And Purdue is out here in Indiana. It is a land-grant university. So it's public university, large. We have about 50,000 students on the main campus and a lot of different degrees, a lot of different programs here, but also the first computer science department in the United States, founded back in 1962. So off I went to Indiana. And I've been there ever since. Now, I came here to Purdue starting in software engineering, but kind of drifted into information security. It was something I was interested in and didn't really know at the time. It wasn't an area that someone could actually study in or be primarily in as a research area. Back then, it wasn't. And it was called information security. Now it's called cybersecurity. Along the way, I started first a laboratory and then a university institute, and I've got some things there. It grew to be a good-sized institute. Still is in existence. I'm now the director emeritus, but we produced over 250 PhDs in the field since it was founded. There's over 120 faculty and 20 academic departments who are now participating in the center. So that was very rewarding. I had a lot of fun doing that and broke a lot of ground. Along the way, I got a chance to do some really fun things. I've been an advisor to government agencies. I was an advisor to staff at the White House for many years. I've testified before Congress 10 times, written a few books, helped start some companies, although I haven't made any money from it. And I've done a lot of travel. I've visited 49 of the 50 states. I have yet to get to Alaska, and that's on my list. And over 24 foreign countries. You can see I haven't made it yet to South America or Africa, but pretty much the other continents. Well, I haven't gotten to Antarctica yet either. But had a lot of good students and made a lot of good friends around the world. But there's still lots more to do, and I'm not quite done yet. I think there's more things yet that I'll be able to do. So that's roughly how I ended up here. If you're really curious about me, you can certainly find out more using the web. But the part I wanted to make there wasn't anything special about my background there. It wasn't that I studied computers in high school. It wasn't that I even knew when I started my undergraduate that's what I wanted to work in. And when I did, it wasn't cybersecurity that I started with. It's just I found that to be really fascinating and a great problem, and I drifted into it, and it turned out to be a good fit. So that's one takeaway, I think, for many of you, is you don't have to be interested in it right at the moment. It could be something, though, that could be just right for you if you tried it. So if you remember, I said that I founded CERIAS with over 120 faculty. And that's not all in computer science. It's in a whole bunch of other departments. In psychology, and I didn't list it here, but philosophy, economics, education, liberal arts, political science, sociology, and linguistics, and education, and management, and a bunch of others. So when I list those, you might say to yourself, how do those fit in with cybersecurity? Well, I used this as a statement when I was founding CERIAS to describe why to people. If there were no computers, there'd be no computer crime. I think that's obvious. But if there were no people, there'd be no computer crime either. If you look at it that way, you realize people are an essential part of the whole ecosystem of using computers. If we only address the issues of computing, we're leaving out a whole lot of other things. We're leaving out the things I mentioned earlier, such as management. We're leaving out social norms. We're leaving out laws. If we're going to address the problems of cybersecurity, we actually have to have a bigger view. So, what are some of these things? Well, computer science and computer engineering, certainly. But if you note here, I list a whole bunch of things that are more than cybersecurity. Software engineering is building correct software, designing networks, designing computer chips, the human-computer interface, artificial intelligence, applying artificial intelligence to be able to detect security problems, for instance, forensics, sensors and sensor design. A lot of computers now are being used to monitor real-time conditions, and if those are fooled, bad things can happen. It goes on and on. Pretty much every subfield of computing actually has some potential ties into cybersecurity. So if you're interested in these areas, you could be involved with cybersecurity as well. Psychology. Psychology is how people think and why they do the things they do. So, insider detection. Why do we have people who work for organizations commit thefts or sabotage systems? Why do people commit espionage? How about using deception, that is lying, as a computer defense to make a computer appear to be something other than it is? How do we design human-computer interfaces so they can be used better and fewer mistakes? I mentioned artificial intelligence, a whole lot of things there about building automatically self-protecting systems. Cognitive psychology is how do we present material to people so that they understand it better, so they can actually understand what is going on with the system and how to address it. Industrial organizational psychology is understanding how best to present results and structure organizations to achieve desired goals. None of these have computing as a primary skill. It's psychology as the primary skill applied to computing, all of which are really interesting. So if you're interested in psychology, you can be interested in cybersecurity as well. Other social sciences like sociology. What are the social norms in computing? What is it that people are expected to do and behave? Law enforcement. Sociology is typically where law enforcement training occurs. Understanding how you enforce laws in cyberspace is challenging for traditional law enforcement agencies. Promoting diversity in the computing environment is important as well, so that we have a variety of people with different points of view, different experiences that are able to be brought to bear on the problems we have. Social media influence and propaganda. You see it online. It's something we've been talking about for influence on elections and buying and other things. Many people are easily swayed by what they see on social media. How do we deal with that? How do we counter that? How do we effectively use that? Agent-based modeling of social systems and security issues. And then the whole notion of privacy. What is privacy? What do we protect? What do we gain? What do we lose? How do we get people thinking about privacy? Or how do we understand what privacy is? Privacy is very socially, very contingent upon the social environment in which it works. The notion of what is private to you is very different to what is private to somebody in another country.
We have a quick question here from a couple of people who have asked the same question, so maybe you can kind of weave it into this. They're asking for what is the typical day in the life of a cyber professional? And I think you're touching on a lot of that here.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that I can even define what a typical cyber professional is, because we have 30 or 40 or more different specializations that we've identified that people can work in. So one kind of cyber professional might be involved in incident monitoring and response. So what they're doing on a regular basis is investigating attempts by people to break into a computer system, finding out what kinds of flaws have been exercised and what needs to be done to fix them. Another kind of professional would be somebody who is educating new users and existing users about how to effectively use their systems without endangering the organization they work in. We have people who are involved in designing new computer systems. So every day they would be involved in plotting out designs, reading up on design features, talking with other people about what are the right features to put in, doing experiments with code, with systems to determine if something works, and then going on to build it. There's a broad range, and they can exist from the very technical kinds of things that I was talking about to the very management oriented, where there's somebody making overall decisions about budget, personnel management, setting policies for organizations. So one of my former students works for the Securities and Exchange Commission, and he sets the rules that companies have to follow to protect their computer systems if they're publicly traded companies. He doesn't actually write any programs, but he does have a huge impact on cybersecurity of the economy. So I really can't give you a typical example. I will say that one thing some people have worried about if they go into this field is the idea that they spend all their time staring at a computer screen. And I would say that seldom happens. Most of these positions involve working with others, working as a team. Unfortunately, having meetings, but that goes with working on a team. There is computing work that goes on, but it's a social activity. It's not a dedicated activity. So if you're really interested in this, it's not something where you're going to go into a cubicle every morning at 9 a.m. and then not talk to anybody until 5 p.m. That kind of job hardly exists at all. Most people actually work in teams on problems. Yeah, I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but that's about as good as I can give without diving further in.
Yeah, I think it was spot on, Spaff. I mean, it points to the fact that having a typical day is kind of rare. They're all unique.
And that's true of a lot of jobs. When you get into a position of meaning, you're there because you've got the background to solve problems. And people bring you problems. And that's the whole idea. I think I've got about 2 more slides here, and let me finish this off. And then I'll certainly answer any other questions. But there are other disciplines I mentioned, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I picked 3 as examples. So in economics, the whole idea of where to invest money and what's a good thing to put money into. Political science, this is an area of great growth, trying to understand what the laws should be, what they should require. And then when we get into international arenas like cyber war, what are the international norms and what are the consequences when we catch people who are damaging our systems from other countries? The security of government as a whole is important. Industrial engineering. A whole lot goes on here about how to structure companies and businesses in ways that we can get our supplies, we can bill our customers, we can design what we need to do, and do it in a way that's secure, especially when we start looking at assembly lines that have robots. Those have to be protected. I mean, you may not think of that immediately, but you see some pictures, for instance, of car factory floors with lots of robots. How do you protect those to make sure that they do the right thing and they don't injure somebody or damage the facility? So every field basically touches some on computing, and if it touches on computing, it has cybersecurity aspects. That's really the idea here. I've listed some areas, including agriculture, medicine. I mentioned factory automation, banking. Every field that has computers, that touches computers, that's on the network, has security issues and privacy issues associated with that computing. We need people who understand security and something, like security and law, security and agriculture, or agriculture and security. That one puzzles some people, but right now, if you were to go visit some modern farms, they use computerized tractors and combines to always do rows the same in the field. Some of them may be automated. They may not have people on them. They're robotic. Those have to be controlled. They use drones and GPS to see what parts of the fields are being watered or need more fertilizer. Those things have to be protected. Huge amounts of the typical farm these days are automated and they involve computers. It's happening in every field. Cybersecurity is a hugely important area where only about 1 out of every 3 positions over the next decade are going to have people available to fill them. So 2/3 of the positions needing cybersecurity expertise are likely to go unfilled at the current rate. So if you're looking for a future, this is a great area to plan for because there's going to be a long-term need. So I'm going to stop there and go back to questions.
What positions does a cyber professional typically start out in, and can you explain how those first few months or first few years are like, what they're like?
It's difficult to give an answer that's true for all positions because some of it depends on the particular kind of training that you have. So if you've been trained in software development, for instance, you're likely to join a team that is designing software or maintaining software. And so for the first couple of years, you're going to be working with that group, learning how the software works, learning how the software fails, finding ways to improve it, and to put out new versions that do better jobs. So my students have done that. If you're trained in incident response, you may go to a group that you get started helping to monitor alarms and working as part of a team to respond to intrusions and to understand what you're going to do about that. Some of my students have actually gone to work for law enforcement agencies in that regard, and they are involved in forensics. When a computer crime has happened, they help collect the evidence and analyze it. They may not be the senior person doing that. So in a lot of these positions, when you go out the first year or two, you're kind of an apprentice. You're working with a more senior person to learn some of the nuances of the position. And after that, you either get to advance within that organization, or a lot of times you may end up going to a different organization, a different company or agency where you become a lead. Again, there's not really a typical position, there's not a typical pathway, but that's where I would say a lot of my students have gotten their start is going off and learning more by working with other senior people in the field.
Thank you.
We have a question here about, can you share a story about when you've worked with international folks when in your travels throughout the world?
So some of my travel has been for academic reasons to go out and present papers. But right now, for example, we're helping the country, the Ukraine, we're helping train some of their educators about how to teach cybersecurity. And if you have looked in the newspapers, or you can go back and study, in the Ukraine, they have a pretty constant cybersecurity threat. The Ukraine is kind of on the front lines between not really a declared war, but a heavy conflict between Russia and the West. And Ukraine is kind of partitioned at the moment, in fact, where there's a Russian influence and then there's a Western influence. And there's a lot of cyber attacks occurring all the time against their power grids and their banking systems. And so they're very interested in building up their own expertise internally. And so we're helping some of those people learn how to protect their systems. I've also done some work with international banks, credit card agencies, and help them understand why some of the standards that have been set in the US for protection make sense for them to include in their local defenses against common threats, or to help them learn how to better investigate some of the thefts that have occurred from their systems. So I can't be more specific than that without disclosing specific companies or agencies, and I'm not at liberty to do that. But some countries around the world have cybersecurity that's as advanced as ours.
Wow.
Without question, it's very good. There are others, however, that don't have the money and the local training to be that good. And in many cases, they're really good students, come to the US or Australia or the UK to get their educations and then stay. They don't go back home. And so those countries don't have as much local expertise and they need a lot of help. So that's another opportunity if you want to travel, working for various companies that go around and advise and help others with their security. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for that going forward.
What was one of your biggest challenges? And how did you work through it?
Well, my challenge may not be something that you'll face, but when I established CERIAS here at Purdue, it was convincing enough people that we should include things other than computer science. Because for a long time, when I started this work, and realized this is 25 years ago, cybersecurity was not really viewed as a separate field. It was viewed as something like system administration, how to maintain a computer, rather than as an area of study and an area that we should focus on. It took me several years to get to that point. And I think what helped me in that was the fact that I had done so much study and reading in other fields. So I could go into other departments and talk to them using their terms about what their studies were, what their research was, and relate it to what we were doing in cybersecurity. So that's how I dealt with that successfully, to the point where several of those departments on campus have given me courtesy appointments as a member of their faculty. I think that's something that all of you going forward may find is a little bit of a challenge. We have many people who are very excited about working with computers, about writing programs or deploying computers, but they don't think about the humans. They don't think about the people. How hard is it going to be for them to use the systems correctly? What are the laws around what you can do? How much is it going to cost to fix some of those? So if any of you are interested in heading into computing, whether it's cybersecurity or not, I would encourage you to think about those other issues, to think about the context of computing, not simply the computer itself. The reason we use computers is because it helps people. It helps our social systems. You should have some understanding of those as well as the computers themselves.
Why does cybersecurity education need to embrace the diverse disciplines necessary for online information assurance, security, and privacy?
To be effective, we need to address the whole problem. And if we only address part of the problem, we're not going to solve things. As an example of that, if we only focused on cyber law enforcement, we'd fail because we simply don't have enough people to do the investigation. It's too slow. Too many people would find loopholes, would find ways to get away. And not everything can be against the law where we have a problem. If we're going to solve some of those issues, we're going to have to look at a broader array of topics. And that's why we need to look at all of those things. It's the case, too, that there are some things that just aren't right, that aren't illegal. So, for instance, some of the issues around privacy are not necessarily illegal to disclose somebody's information or to use it for marketing, but we'd like to protect it, I think, that the social norms we have are that some information should remain private and under the control of the people about whom that information refers.
Well, thank you very much, Spaff. And I want to just share with you how much of an honor it was for us at the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation to have you on our series. You've been a great supporter of computer science, cybersecurity, and all the things that Purdue has done. As most of the people know, Purdue was one of the very first in the Centers of Academic Excellence that NSA sponsored, and now with over 300. But Purdue is one of our research schools, which is one of the elites. And so we really appreciate you sharing with us today. And for all the folks who are on the session today, thank you for such great questions to Spaff today. And we thank you for joining us. We have another lineup for tomorrow, so please feel free to check our website for our last series of chats in this Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. So on behalf of the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation, we thank everyone for being here, and thanks again, Spaff.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye.